Now, exciting part, today, hey, we're in week 3 of our series called Manhunt. And man, it's been fun. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 speakers each week as we've gone through the series called Manhunt. And the heart of the series is seeing Jesus in the Old Testament. And so, well, one thing that a lot of people don't understand fully about the Christian faith is what sits at the heart and the center of it. And at the core and the center of the Christian faith is Jesus. That our faith is built around and is all about Jesus. A lot of people, they think, Christianity is all about good morals. And I can understand why people think that, because Jesus was a man of incredible morals, right? So, of course, there's a lot of good morals that come through. But at the heart of it, it's not simply about good morals. It's about a person called Jesus. And when you read the scriptures, he is at the core of it. He is at the center of it. And what you discover is that so much of the Old Testament points to what God's going to do through Jesus. And then a whole lot of the New Testament, which was all written after Jesus, is about Jesus and helping us understand more about what Jesus did and who he is. And one of the challenges, and I shared this last week, that a lot of us Christians, even that have been around for a long time, is we can struggle to read the Old Testament because sometimes, how do I make sense of this? And so we thought, hey, let's do this series called Manhunt, where we go looking for Jesus in the Old Testament. And we've had some incredible eye-opening experiences where people have just helped us see Jesus in that. And so I'm really excited today because we've got 2 more incredible speakers. And I know, again, like pretty much everyone we've had through this whole series, it's the first time we've ever spoken here at LifeSwitch. And what I love about this community is everyone's just so encouraging and heartwarming, and you're just always nice to everyone. And so I just encourage us as Abbey comes up and then as Andrew comes up, let's just lean in, let's encourage them, because these are incredible people and we're so lucky to have them in our community. And I'll hand it over to you, Abbey, to kick us off this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I just stare at Carly all the time because I always need encouragement. She's like super encouraging when I'm like, I can't speak to people. Anyway. Kia ora, everybody. My name is Abbey. I've been coming to this church for just over a year now, and I'm really excited about the series, and it's actually taught me so much as I've been looking at kind of the deeper scriptures around the Old Testament, how that points to Jesus. So anyone that knows me knows that I take a long time to get to what I'm going to say, so I'm just going to get right in there. So I just wanted to start with a little story. When I, about 10 years ago, me and a few friends were hanging out with our, at the time, pastor's kid. It's not weird. He was like 8 and we were like in our 20s, but that's okay. He invited us to his birthday party. So we, kind of being sort of young adult-ish, forgot about it until the last moment. But we decided that we were going to get him this gift. And so what we did, because everybody likes a good gag, right? Especially with like 7-year-olds, so good. So what we did was we went and bought this ginormous packing box, and we filled it with sticks, stones, rocks, real heavy things, and we put a little voucher in it, which was like a day out with the girls. So it was kind of like, going out for dinner and doing all these really fun things. But we wrapped this thing up. It was humongous. And we turned up at his house for his birthday party with all his friends. And he was psyched. He was so excited about seeing this huge box. And then obviously we were just even more excited than him for him to open it. But then obviously he opens it, and it's just full of stuff, and then it's this tiny little piece of paper in this box. And he laughed, and it was all fun, and we had a great day with him. But the point that I want to make about that story is that sometimes God's plan is in the package, but it can look a little unexpected. When he opened that box, he was so surprised to not see like a massive present, but it was just this simple piece of paper. The package was so big, but what's inside of it can look a little unexpected. I think about Elijah going up the mountain to find God, expecting the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the creator of the universe to turn up in full force. The Bible says that there was a great wind, an earthquake, and a great blaze of fire, but God wasn't in any of it. Where did Elijah find him? In the small whisper. God's plan was in the package of Jesus, but Jesus didn't look or act the way that people expected. Jesus was in the line of kings. From David, almost by definition, a warrior. Isaiah 11:4, talking about Jesus, says this, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. And then it goes down and says, in that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. There's so many scriptures that talk about the might of kings. There are a lot of Old Testament scriptures that refer to Jesus or a king coming in might to rule with a sword and by power. There was this thinking that when the Messiah first came, he would come as a king, a military superpower. He would rally the armies and he would restore Israel by force and drive the Romans out of Jerusalem. That was what a lot of people expected of Jesus. Certainly not a baby, certainly not a servant, certainly not born to a young girl and a carpenter, certainly not with a bunch of fishermen, tax collectors, a zealot, and a thief. But how does this relate to the Old Testament? Where can we find Jesus? The reason that I've titled my message, Nah Man, thanks, got that. It's because when I first read the story of Naaman in the Bible, I thought it actually was pronounced Nah Man. And it's probably the most used phrase in my household. I say it to my husband, can we buy this IT gear? Nah man. Mum, can we go biking down this huge cliff? Nah man. Mum, can I down my third ice cream in half an hour? Nah, man. So when I had the opportunity to speak, it's probably not a surprise that the man himself popped into my spirit. He's my guy. He's not just for the spelling. He's a guy that I expected to say, nah, man, over and over. But his story speaks of being found. Naaman's story speaks of humility. His story speaks of expectations. His story speaks of our need and our abilities. His story speaks of grace and pride. His story speaks of inclusion and freedom. But more importantly, I hope to show us that his story speaks of Jesus' story. So we're going to read together the story in a second from 2 Kings 5, 1-14 about Naaman. At the time, Naaman was this warrior. He lived in Syria in the 9th century BC. Israel was not really in a very good spot. There was a lot of war at that time. Israel had actually split into two kingdoms at that point. The north of Israel was in the north and Judah in the south. There was this massive push for worship of other gods and idols. Israel, God's people, were being oppressed. They were being battled against, one of which was the army of the Syrian army, who Naaman was a commander of. He was a guy that was leading an army that was oppressing the Israelite people. So let's read this story. Naaman was a general of the army under the king of Aram. He was important to his master, who held him in the highest esteem because it was him that God had given victory to Aram. A truly great man, but afflicted with a grievous skin disease. It so happened that Aram, on one of its raiding expeditions against Israel, captured a young girl who became a maid to Naaman's wife. One day she said to her mistress, if only my master could meet the prophet at Samaria, he would be healed of his skin disease. Naaman went straight to his master and reported what the girl from Israel had said. Well, then go, said the king of Aram, and I'll send a letter of introduction to the king of Israel. So he went off, taking with him about 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothes. Naaman delivered the letter to the king of Israel. The letter read, when you get this letter, you'll know that I've personally sent my servant Naaman to you. Heal him of his skin disease. When the king of Israel read the letter, he was terribly upset, ripping his robe to pieces. He said, "Am I a god with the power to bring life or death, that I get orders to heal this man from his disease? What's going on here? That king's trying to pick a fight. That's what." Elisha, the man of God, heard what happened, that the king of Israel was so distressed that he ripped his robe to shreds. He sent word to the king, "Why are you so upset ripping your robe like this? Send him to me so he'll learn that there's a prophet in Israel." So Naaman, with his horse and chariots, arrived in style and stopped at Elisha's door. Elisha sent out a servant to meet him with this message: "Go to the river Jordan and immerse yourself 7 times. Your skin will be healed and you'll be as good as new." Naaman lost his temper. He turned on his heel, saying, "I thought he'd personally come out and meet me, call on the name of God, wave his hand over the diseased spot and get rid of the disease. The Damascus rivers, Abana and Pharpar, are cleaner by far than any of the rivers in Israel. Why not bathe in them? At least I'd get clean." He stormed off, mad as a hornet. But his servants caught up with him and said, "Father, if the prophet had asked you to do something hard and heroic, wouldn't you have done it? So why not this simple wash and be clean?" So he did it. He went down and immersed himself in the Jordan 7 times, following the orders of the holy man. His skin was healed, and it was like the skin of a little baby. He was good as new. So here we have this leader of men, a Syrian warrior valued highly by kings, who had wealth, horses, chariots, glory, gold, fineries in life. No need for anything. Yet he had leprosy, this incurable, deathly disease. This disease that does not discriminate, that invades both the rich and the poor, the high in status or low in society. It didn't matter how much clout he had, the riches he possessed, he could not stave or buy his way out of this disease. But God had a plan for Naaman. This non-Jew, this oppressor of Israel, this oppressor of God's people, worshipper of other gods. And how interesting to think that how easy it is for us to have grace for those who are needy or are sick or need something in our own networks or in our churches. But what about those people that threaten our own way of life? What about those people that actually come against our culture or come against our own values? Those that make us feel uncomfortable or who we fundamentally don't agree with and threaten the things that we believe. How willing are we then to extend grace to them? How willing are we then to invite them into our homes? How willing are we to hang out with them, meet their needs, to share our story with them, to pray for them? And what about our rich boss who ignores us in the hallway, who doesn't know our name? How willing are we then? But God had a plan for Naaman. His plan came in the package of a servant. It came in the form of an unlikely girl, a servant who belonged to a people that Naaman was actively oppressing and at war with, who he didn't have any value or put any worth in, but she had a message. Who was she to present a solution to Naaman? What valor or status did she have to offer to Naaman? But what we know about God is that his plan can come in a package that looks like a servant. His plan can come in a package that looks like a baby, that looks like an average-looking guy who has no riches or status to offer. So here's the servant who says to Naaman, "Go and see the prophet. Surely he can heal you." So where does Naaman go? To the king. "Surely he can heal me. Am I not worthy of his honor?" So he goes with everything he's got. He goes with his gold, he goes with his riches, his horses, his chariots, and fine clothes to present to the king. That makes sense to him. Someone of my standing surely will have favor with the king, but the king turns him away, getting angry and ripping his robes, saying, "Who am I to heal you?" But God has a plan. And it comes in the package of an Israelite prophet. Not only an Israelite prophet, the message of Naaman's healing comes in the form of yet another servant. Naaman turns up with all his gold, his chariots and horses, all the wealth he can, and presents it to Elisha, yet it wins him nothing. It's the message delivered by a servant that has freedom in it. He says, "Go and dunk yourself in the Jordan River 7 times. And Naaman is angry. A servant Does he even know who I am? I expected Elisha to come out and wave his magic wand and do some kind of stuff and I'd be healed. I expect him to wave his magic wand and everything would be better. And what's more, in this dirty river? Why can't I do it in the nice, clean, familiar, comfortable rivers of Damascus? Not this insignificant, dirty, uncomfortable river that is unfamiliar and not my choice. But God had a plan, and it came in the package of what? Yet another servant with the simple message, wash and be clean. It doesn't take strength and heroism and proving yourself. It takes your simple willingness to come to the river and receive the water. So Naaman humbled himself. He came to the rivers, to the water, dunked himself, and he was healed. So how does this represent Jesus? On paper, Naaman was not the guy. He was an enemy of God's people. He oppressed them. He threatened their way of life. He was proud. He looked like he had it all together on the outside. He did not have an understanding of God. He didn't have all the boxes ticked, but God chose him. When Naaman couldn't heal himself, when Naaman was rejected, when Naaman couldn't earn his way into healing, when he was out of options, when he had nothing left to offer, God came to him in a package that was so unlikely, that was so unexpected, that was outside the norm, that came in the form of a servant that was messy, that was unfamiliar, that was uneventful, like the river that he dunked in. It was unremarkable, it was average, it looked nothing special on the outside. But God would choose to bring healing, grace, and freedom in those circumstances by a servant and the unexpected. God chose him. God went after him. The wrong guy who presented the wrong way with the wrong attitudes and the wrong circumstances. Luke 4:27 says that there were many lepers in Israel, but none of them were healed except Naaman the Syrian. God could have chosen anyone to be healed. He could have chosen anyone, but he chose Naaman, I believe, to remind us that his healing, his grace, Jesus' completed work on the cross is for everyone. No matter their ability, no matter their circumstance or status. I just want to finish with this. When we can see this in the story of John 5, a similar story of the man at the pool who was sick. He's crippled and has been there for many years, knowing that if he could just get in the water, in this pool, he might be healed, but he's unable. He cannot move. He's been lying there. He's been unable to be the first in this pool to be able to get healed. He cannot get himself to where he needs to be, but God went after him. Like Naaman, he went after him. When he couldn't get himself to the healing water of that pool, when he couldn't get himself to that healing water, the living water came to him. Jesus walked up to him, chose him, and came to him. This is the message of grace that preaches that we were sick, while there was no way for us to heal ourselves, while we couldn't earn our way or bring our riches or bring our clout or bring everything we can, when we couldn't, if that wasn't going to work for us and that wasn't going to bring us healing, Jesus made a way. When we have no way to get into that pool like that man, when we have no hope that things can get different, when we have lost confidence that things can get better, when there seems to be no way forward, when you're so stuck in your circumstances and cannot do enough to earn yourself out of your situation, Jesus says, when you can't get to the water, I am the living water. Because our world says that we need to be first, we need to be the best, we need to get ourselves ahead, we need to be the right person at the right time with the right stuff, with the right label, the right amount of gold, the right amount of chariots like Naaman. But God says, my grace doesn't need you to be first. My grace covers you. I have done it for you at the cross. God's package in Jesus the servant is accessible to everyone, Jew, Gentile, those who oppressed him and killed him, took him as a criminal and hung him on the cross. You and I Those who thought they have it all together, those who have all the riches and glory in this world, who have the clout, all of us have been chosen by God. All of us have been come after and sought after by God. And he came after each one of us in the form of a servant, Jesus. And none of us are excluded from that. Awesome. Did it. Okay, well, now that was like the little Andrew's actually going to come up now, and he's going to just smash it out of the water. So thanks.
Thank you, Abbey. Well, kia ora te whānau, ko Andrew Ray toku ingoa. You may not know me, or you may know me as the guy that just sings a little too loud and a little off key. Or you may know me as the setup guy that just has to get the seats just right in the exact line. By the way, the seats are in perfect order today. Thank you very much. Check those out beforehand. Or you may even know me from my wife, Robin, or my 3 kids, Madison, Joshua, and Caleb. What could be better than being known for your kids? It's just like, oh, you're Caleb's dad. What could be a better thing in life, right? Anyway, what you wouldn't know about me, though, is that a number of years ago, I spent a year at a seminary studying theology, and it was there that I learnt this word, Christophany. Right. Now, Christophany is not a word that you hear every day, right? It's just like, oh, did you hear about the latest Christophany? Or did you see that Christophany over there? No, it's not that sort of word. In fact, it's not even a word that is in the Bible. But it is a very useful word. It's a word from the Greek to appear. So Christ appearing, it's an appearance of Christ. So if we're hunting Jesus in the Old Testament, what better way than to look for a Christophany in the Old Testament? Now, whether or not you believe that Jesus could be appearing before his timeline in history or not is not really relevant. What's important here is that it's an opportunity for us to look at the nature and the character of God that is being shown through this particular example. But before we go on and look at this Christophany, I just want to start with a simple thought, and I'm going to come back to this thought. Because God asks us to, and asks me to trust him, and trust that when he asks something of me, he's not asking because he needs something. He's not asking because he needs to get something. He's asking because he wants me to be more like him. And so put another way, and here's our little phrase for today, God asks us to give of ourselves not so that he will get, but so that we will become more like him. Okay, so this is where we're going to come back to that. But let's face it, when we are making decisions, we are often running down paths in our minds that we have run down hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of times in the past. It is hard to change. And so when that small, quiet voice speaks to us and says, hey, you could do this a different way, when God asks us to embark upon a path that we've never been on before, to branch out into the bush, cutting a pathway through the weeds and through the brush. It's helpful to have a little bit of extra motivation to do that. And so what I want you to leave you with today is this thought that to take away an obstacle, that God needs something from us, that God wants something from us, that he needs us to do something. Because I just don't believe that. I believe that when God asks us to do something, he does it because he loves us. He does it because he knows the perfect plan and wants us to walk down that path for our own good. Right, so that's where we're going today. God is good, his motive is pure, and he wants nothing but the best for me and for you. So let's take a look at this Christophany, shall we? We'll finally get there. So this is in Genesis 14, 18 to 20, and it's the story of Abram and Melchizedek. Yes, I had to practice that, don't worry about that. Verse 18, then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hands. So let's remember, God asks us to give of ourselves, not so he will get, but so we become more like him. So what does the story of Melchizedek tell us about the nature of Jesus and the nature of God? Well, I want to start with the first thing, 2 points, just 2 points today. Our God, first point, our God is a giver and he always moves first. So Melchizedek came out to meet Abram and he brought a gift to him. And this really speaks to me of God and of Jesus, who our God is a giver and he is an initiator. He gives of himself sacrificially, without expectation of return, without expectation of payment, compensation, or recourse. He is, by his very nature, a giver. Now, I could give you hundreds of examples of God giving to his people, and they mention give more than nearly 2,500 times in the Bible. So this is not an uncommon concept. However, what I wanted to talk about a little bit was just the miracles of Jesus, because in the first 4 books of the New Testament, which we call the Gospels, we see eyewitness accounts of people that were with and saw Jesus. And what we see in those accounts is we see Jesus stopping and giving time. He gives time to people that seem seemingly inconsequential. He stops to heal a woman with issues of blood who had no status in society. He stops for the woman in the well, to talk about her past, her present, and what her future could be. And at the end of that conversation, we see her change her path. We see her trek off into the wild, battering a new path into the wild that she hasn't ever been down before. And so we see God, countless times stopping to invest himself in his people. And yet, of course, for the best example, we just need to kind of fast forward to the end of that story, to the end of Jesus' story, where he gives himself on the cross. He gave the one thing that he only has one of. And you can't expect to get anything back after you give your life, right? And he gave his life to us so that we would know freedom, so that we would know peace, so that we would know a relationship with God, that we could see God face to face. So, and the thing is, he did this even before we were born. So Jesus was doing something for us today 2,000 years ago. What I want to say is our God is a giver and our God always goes first. Point number 2, said there was only 2 points. Point number 2, our God is not motivated by need, only by love, because his nature is love. Now, this giving sacrificially thing is not something that really works for me. I mean, what I understand is it's difficult for me to even pass the butter down the other end of the table without expecting that I might get something back. It's even with my family, when I'm being sacrificial, which isn't all the time, let's be really clear about that. But even when I am giving of myself to my family, there's always split motives. There's always a sense of, well, we're family, we belong together, they do this back for me, we're together. And so I think as humans, it's really hard to not have split motives in everything that we do. And yet God is different. God is other. We use this word holy. God is holy. And holy just means separated from us, different to us, of a completely different nature. And so giving sacrificially without agenda is just another example of why and how God is not like us. And the reason that we know that God asks us to give of ourselves not for him and not because he gets something is because he's almighty. Now, almighty in this context, I'm going to use this word almighty, I'm going to use it in a specific context to mean that God is all-powerful and ever-present. Now, you get that sense of almighty, it gives you that kind of context, but I really want to just look at those 2 aspects now. Firstly, God is all-powerful. Hebrews 3 says, the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. Now, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole here, but prepare yourself. The laws of nature are merely the way that God ordinarily upholds and sustains the universe. The laws of nature are not something in and of themselves. God sustains each and every one of us. He sustains each and every part of the universe. And so, if God chooses, in his wisdom, to sustain any part of that universe in a different way at any moment, he can do that. This is what we call the miraculous, right? The miraculous, which to us, the word miracle actually means astounding, unbelievable. Miracles are things that we cannot understand because they contravene the laws of nature. And yet for God, whether he sustains it in one way or the other is not difficult. And so miracles are not difficult for God. He has all power. All power belongs to him. All things are sustained by him. God does not need anything from us. He is perfect in and of himself. I think that point that he is perfect and complete is really important, and that he doesn't need anything. Because, in fact, he created the universe in the first place, not because he needed anything, but because he wanted us to experience and know the perfect love that Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit have in and of themselves. So, God is all-powerful. God is also ever-present. Looking at Jeremiah 23, 24, who can hide in secret places so that I cannot see them, declares the Lord. Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord? God is available everywhere, all the time, to billions of people. He is not limited by any number of computations that his Wi-Fi or internet speed can compensate for, right? He's not limited in any way. He is unlimited. He is in all places, available to all people at all times. There is no limit to God. So to conclude, God doesn't need to control me. He doesn't need me to turn up to anything. He doesn't need me to do my neighbour's lawns or help the person down the road or serve at church. He doesn't need any of that stuff. But he does want me, and he does care for me. And he does want me to pursue that perfect plan that he's laid out in the Bible for us. He has a perfect plan for us. And we know it's the perfect plan because God sits outside of time, looking down on us and can see the beginning from the end. God doesn't need anything from me, but he does want something from me. We had C.S. Lewis quote last week. I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. He has a quote that says, God doesn't want something from us. He simply wants us. It's about us at the end of the day. It's not about what he needs. It's about us. Now, what I didn't read at the start of the scripture was actually the end of the story. And this story culminates with Abram giving a gift right back to Melchizedek. And in my opinion, this is the right and appropriate response for us when God, right in response to God's goodness and grace. As he gives himself to us, he invites us to give ourselves back to him. This response recognizes that the motivation behind God's asking for us, his invitation to us to love God and love our neighbour, that it's perfect for us to respond in that way. And God asks us to follow, not because he needs us, because he knows that this is the perfect plan for our life. This is the place that we are meant to be. He has the keys to the door. He has the map to the treasure. He has the combination to the vault that unlocks the very best plan for us and for our lives. God asks us to give of ourselves, not so he will get, but so we will become more like him. Back to you, Clint.